What's going on, bottom line viewers? It's Mitch back here, and you guys requested it. NFL tier lists, they're really hot on YouTube right now, and of course, I got to get myself in the action. Today, we're going to rank the defenses in the NFL going into this season. So last season, yeah, it has a little bit to do with it, but not a ton. This is how I believe and project these defenses to play over the course of 2019. I'm not taking into account really injuries at this point in time. I'm not projecting or predicting injuries. I'm going off what their roster, their depth chart, their coaching, their scheme, previous success with players, previous success with coaching, and mixing that all into one big bag. And that is going to be my evaluation for this tier list of the 2019 NFL defenses, ranking them from the elite to the trash. So let's get into it. Let me share my screen real quick, and then we're going to get into it. So we are here to rank every single defense in the NFL. Elite, the best defenses in the NFL, the good, near elite, but not quite elite. They can have a down game every once in a while, but they can have the capability of also shutting down teams defensively. Average, they're not bad, but they're not great. Opportunistic, I added this category as a category that there are bad defenses in the NFL, but they're good at specific things. Stripping the football away from quarterbacks, causing interceptions, causing turnovers, or maybe getting sacks. Like the Chiefs defense from last year, for example. They're very good situationally. Maybe they're very good in terms of red zone defense, but they suck everywhere else, like some of my Patriot defenses have been in the past. So let's start off with the New York Giants. I don't know why the Giants, this is like way out of order. I don't know what type of order they're running with here. But let's start with the New York Giants. Now, the New York Giants, they had a couple of nice picks in the draft. They addressed their nose tackle position after losing Damon Snacks Harrison. They addressed their corner position by getting Baker late in the first round. I still think they lack significantly pass rushers on the edge. I don't think Ogletree is really the answer at middle linebacker. And personally, I do think they got a huge downgrade at safety. Even though they did add Peppers, I don't think he's as good as Collins is. I'm personally not a huge Jabril Peppers fan. So I think they got better in some areas, like at corner, but I do think they got worse in other areas. So that being said, I think the Giants, while I don't think they're really horrible, I think they have to be in the worst category. Like, I don't think they're the worst defense in the league by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't think they're in the opportunistic category. I don't really think they're average either. Now, I could be wrong, and maybe by the end of this video, I'll put them up once I go over all the other defenses. But the Giants, for now, they're going to go in the worst category. Now, the Jacksonville Jaguars are perhaps the toughest team to evaluate defensively. They lost a lot of big names on defense. Both of their starting safeties are now gone, even though they drafted Ronnie Harrison last year pretty high in the draft. They did lose Barry Church. They did lose Tashawn Gibson. And those are two big names. Now, they still have their corners intact, which is an elite corner tandem in Jalen Ramsey and A.J. Bouye. They still do have Miles Jack, who's an elite linebacker, but they did lose Talvin Smith at linebacker. So probably Jake Ryan is going to have to play a little bit more. Their D-line is still very good. Their scheme is pretty good overall. I wouldn't say it's the best. I say the Jags defense is more based on athletes and what they can do athletically. But overall, I think when you come to the Jaguars, they still have elite level talent basically everywhere, and they have two shutdown corners. They have two great pass rushers. They have depth on the D-line. So I'm going to go with the Jaguars in elite. Even though they didn't play like that all the time last year, they certainly do for 2019 have the talent to be in that category. So that's why I'm going to put them there. Now, the Tennessee Titans are a very interesting one because I don't think they have like any great players. Like they have Casey, and he's probably the only great player. I mean, Byard is close to being great. He's very good. Their corners are solid. Their linebacking core is okay. They could use another edge rusher. They did add Cameron Wake after losing Morgan and losing Arakpo. They do have Harold Landry, who they drafted last year. They added in the draft to their defensive line. It's tough. I think the Titans are going to be in the good category. I don't think they're elite. I don't think they're average. I think they're good. Like, they have the capability to play very well. Mike Vrabel's a defensive coach. They have Dean Pease there as a defensive coordinator. They have some things going for them. They have a solid secondary. They have a solid defensive line, but they don't have anything that's elite. And they don't have a great pass rush, which doesn't allow them to be an elite defense, but they are a good defense. The Houston Texans, this is difficult because the Texans have elite players all over their defense, whether that's Jadeveon Clowney, J.J. Watt, Merciless, the list goes on. Now, they did lose Tyrann Mathieu. They did lose also Kareem Jackson. I think those are two really big losses. Deshaun Gibson will replace one of those players, but it's going to be hard to replace both. Justin Reed's a promising young player. McKinney is a really good linebacker. I'm going to say that the Texans, because of their secondary, is not elite, but it is good. So they have the capability to be good because they're very good against the run, but they're not great against the pass overall, even though they do have pass rushers and really good players. So I'm going to go the Texans, same level as the Titans. The Chicago Bears, I think they're one of the more obvious elite selections. Although they did lose Vic Fangio to the Denver Broncos, they got back Chuck Pagano as their defensive coordinator. He's not bad. I think he's actually pretty good, especially in his past as a defensive coordinator. Probably a better defensive coordinator than a head coach, to be honest. Defensively, they have elite players at every position. And what I mean by every position is literally every position. Defensive tackle, they have Akeem Hicks. Edge rusher, they have Khalil Mack. Linebacker, they have, take your pick, Roquan Smith, Danny Trevathan, both very good players. They have at safety Eddie Jackson. They did lose Adrian Amos. They got back Clinton Dix, who's not as good as Amos, but different type of player. Corner-wise, they have Fuller. So they have elite players at every position. I think a big loss for them outside of Fangio will be Bryce Callahan. That's kind of my interesting thought about them. I don't know if they'll be as good as last year, but I still think they're going to be in the top 5. So then you go to the Cowboys. I also believe the Cowboys defense to be elite. I think they're going to be even better than last year, and they were very good last year. I mean, they shut down the Saints and basically gave the blueprint to how to play the Saints. They have perhaps the best linebacker core in the entire NFL with Van Der Esch, Smith, and Lee, and they have decent depth at that spot. Their biggest weakness is their safety position, but their defensive line is very, very good, starting with DeMarcus Lawrence. They added Robert Quinn. They added also Covington to the defensive tackle spot. They have good corners. Byron Jones is very underrated. Awuzie is very good. I think the Cowboys defense is just growing as a unit. They haven't really lost any pieces, and I think that's going to help them evolve into an elite defense, possibly even top 3 this year. Now, the Cincinnati Bengals, they're tough because the Bengals don't have like terrible talent on their defense. I think they do have a decent defensive line when it comes to Carlos Dunlap. You have the stud Geno Atkins. I think that Carl Lawson is really good. They have Sam Hubbard, who's a decent depth guy, younger player. Linebacking core is really, really bad, and it perhaps needs work before the season starts if they can add anywhere. And they also have okay corners. I mean, William Jackson's really good, I think, as a man-to-man corner, and I think he's one of the most underrated corners in the league. Drake Kirkpatrick is decent. He's not great. I'm going to say that the Bengals defense is average. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's good. I think it could use some linebackers. I think it could use maybe another pass rusher, corner, whatever. It could use some depth. It could certainly use safeties, but I think the biggest thing, if the Bengals actually had a really good defensive coordinator, they might be even in the good category, but they're just average to me at this point because most of their best players are aging. The Kansas City Chiefs, I know a lot of people will probably be mad at me. I think you place them in the opportunistic category, which is probably where I would have placed them last year. Even though their defense gives up a lot of yards, they're good on third down. They're good at causing turnovers. They're good at sacking the quarterback, and they're pretty good in the red zone. So in those key situational places, they're very good. Now, where they're not good is their secondary is awful for the most part. I mean, they have no corners that can really cover anyone man-to-man. They have decent safeties now. They have a really destructive, really good pass rush from Frank Clark to Chris Jones to Alex Okafor. They have really good pass rushers. Linebacking core is okay. So I'm going to place them at the opportunistic category as a team that's really good situationally, but gives up a lot of yards and sometimes a lot of points. The Philadelphia Eagles. Now, some would consider them elite. I'm kind of thinking about it right now. They don't have any holes. If I'm being honest with you, like they might have a little hole at linebacker, but even then they still have like a Nigel Bradham, who's a very good player. They have a great defensive line rotation, like Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, Malik Jackson. They lost Michael Bennett, but they got back Malik Jackson. So that's a pretty fair trade-off mostly. I mean, maybe Bennett's a little bit better, but and then you go, and they no longer have Chris Long, I don't think. I think he's retiring. And then they have, who else am I missing? Derek Barnett. They have Timmy Jernigan. I mean, they go like 8 deep on their D-line. Linebacking-wise, I said that's maybe one of their weaknesses. Malcolm Jenkins is a great player. Their corners are okay, which is if they had like a shutdown corner, then they would be truly elite. I am going to say that they're good. I don't think they're elite because, again, I don't think they have those corners to be elite. And to me, corners are a huge part of modern-day NFL defense. You need at least one shutdown corner to be elite, and the Eagles don't have one, so that's why it keeps them back from being elite. When they do play like the Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady's, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees's, the guys that can pick you apart, I do think those quarterbacks can take advantage if they get protection. So that's why they're in the good category. The LA Rams, this is also difficult because they played really well. Like they played like an elite defense in the playoffs, but they played like a bad defense throughout the season. So overall, I think because of the inconsistencies, I'm going to go with average. They did lose Ndamukong Suh. They got a little bit older on defense, and I'm concerned that their defense has old players at every level, whether that's Clay Matthews, whether that's Eric Weddle or Aqib Talib. All these players are old, and they're in important roles, which I'm not sure I'm a huge fan of. Now, they still have talent. Like, Talib's really good. Weddle's good. They have Johnson at safety as well. And then you have Marcus Peters. You have, obviously, the best defensive player in the league, Aaron Donald. So the Rams are strange because they are a team that has a really good defensive coordinator, that has really good players, but they can also not play up to their potential. Hopefully they do this year, but I just see them as an average defense, a team that can play good or bad, given on the matchup. The New England Patriots. Now, the Patriots defense, I think, is going to be even better than they were last year, which I do think they were kind of sneaky good last year. And yes, they lost Trey Flowers, but they got back Michael Bennett. They drafted Chase Winovich. They've added Collins as well to the linebacking core who can also pass rush. They have really good linebackers, you know, Dante Hightower, Kyle Van Noy, Collins. They have Juwan Bentley, who's a promising young player. Really good safeties, McCourty, Harmon, Chung. They have probably, in my opinion, the best corners in the league. Gilmore, J.C. Jackson, Jason McCourty, Jonathan Jones. They added Jawan Williams in the second round. Their real main thing is they don't have great pass rushers. Like, they don't have like a guy that's going to get 10 sacks. But Belichick is so creative on how he creates pressure that I think at the very least they're a good defense. And because I don't think they have that pass rusher, I'm going to say they're just good. Although I could say the Patriots are borderline elite. Like, I think they're in the same category as the Eagles are. While the Eagles have a great defensive line, the Patriots have a great secondary, and that's kind of where they're balanced out. So that's where I'll put the Patriots, is in the good category, probably in the upper echelon of the good. The Detroit Lions defense, I think, has some pieces now that they've added Trey Flowers. They've added Justin Coleman to the secondary. Obviously, they have Darius Slay. They still don't have a ton of talent, though. I'm going to say that the Lions, because they have a solid coordinator in Matt Patricia are an average defense. They have the capability of being better. They have the capability of being better against the run. They have Snacks Harrison, Trey Flowers, very good run defenders. I think they will be very good against the run, but I don't think they're great against the pass. So overall, they're average. The Arizona Cardinals, I don't think are that terrible, but given that Patrick Peterson is not going to be there, they could be one of the worst defenses without Patrick Peterson because they're stretching their secondary thin. But even then, they have Budda Baker at safety. They have DJ Swearinger. They have Hicks at linebacker, who they added. They added Terrell Suggs. They have Chandler Jones. I'm going to say the Cardinals defense is average, and they could be borderline good if they have Patrick Peterson, but I'm going to say they're average. The Washington Redskins defense, I don't think is they're definitely not elite, and I don't think they're good either. They did lose a little bit in the pass rushing department, although they did draft Sweat, so that's a plus, but they lost Preston Smith. I don't love their secondary in any way, shape, or form, but Landon Collins is a nice add for them, although I think they spent too much money on him. That's a side point, though. I'm going to go with the Redskins defense. They do have a good defensive coordinator. I'm going to say they're average. I don't think they're good. I don't think they're great. I don't think they're really opportunistic or the worst. I just think they're kind of average. They're in the middle. They have good scheme. They can play really well. They don't really cause a ton of turnovers. So I'm going to say they're average. The Buffalo Bills. People are going to get a little mad because I think they ranked very well on defense last year, and they have a great coach for defense. Like, McDermott's a great coach for defense. I don't think they do have the pass rushers to be elite. I think they're good. They have a good secondary. They have Micah Hyde. They have White. They have Poyer. Linebacking core is okay. If Edmonds takes a step up, then they could potentially be in the elite category. Milano's okay. You know, they have Lorenzo Alexander. They have Hughes, who's really underrated off the edge. Adding Oliver is big, and maybe depending on how good Oliver is in his first season, they could also be elite. But, you know, it's tough to tell because their offense was so bad last year that it's tough to really tell if it was their defense's fault at times or if it was their offense's fault at times. But I think they're in the upper echelon. Like, I think they're probably a little bit above New England, right around New England, Philadelphia. They're borderline elite, but they're good for the most part. I would say they're very good. How about that? The Indianapolis Colts are an interesting defense. I think they're opportunistic. Now, they might be, like, given on how you take it, you could consider the average and opportunistic category to be about the same. I think the Colts last year really benefited off the fact that they were good situationally. They were good in the red zone. They didn't give up a lot of big plays. They have a really effective zone scheme that they play very well, but they don't have like elite talents really anywhere outside of Darius Leonard. Like, I don't think anyone else is elite on their defense. They have okay safety play. They have okay corner play. Adding the Rocky Sin is a big pick for them. Defensive line-wise, Jabal Sheard is good. Justin Houston, I don't think he's great anymore, but he's good. You know, they have, just good. Like, they're good. They're opportunistic. They're good situationally. They're very good in terms of playing off of how good their offense is, kind of like the Chiefs. So I think they're in the same category as the Chiefs. Possibly I should have put the opportunistic category beside the average category, but they don't allow you to do that. So whatever. The New Orleans Saints, their defense was actually better than I expected it to be last year in terms of numbers. Cameron Jordan is good. They added Malcolm Brown. I don't think that's a huge add, but I know Saints fans are excited about that. Sheldon Rankins is good. They have DeMario Davis, who I think is super underrated. Marshawn Lattimore is a top-tier corner, but their other corners are not great. Their safety play is okay. I'm going to say the Saints are borderline good or average, and that's tough. I think they're on the bottom of good. They're kind of like average, so I'm going to say average. I don't think they're like a defense that's going to win you a game or even like shut down an opponent, but they can make plays. Maybe they're opportunistic. Maybe I should put them in that category. But I think losing like a guy like even Alex Okafor is a big loss because you're relying a lot on Davenport to make plays now, even though he was a first-round pick. He didn't really prove to be last year. I would say the Saints are very similar to the Rams. I would put them in the same category as average. You know what? I'm going to change the Rams to opportunistic. That makes more sense. And the Saints, I'm going to put in the, yeah, I guess the Saints are, you know what? I'll move the Saints to good. That's fine. I'll put the Saints to good. I think they're at the bottom of the good, though. So I'll put that like that. All right, the Seattle Seahawks. The Seattle Seahawks lost Frank Clark, who's their second best defensive player. I know people got mad at me when I said he's borderline their best player. Bobby Wagner is elite. KJ Wright is good. They don't have Earl Thomas anymore, but their safety play is okay without him. Corner-wise, they probably have one good corner. Losing Justin Coleman is not good for them. Defensive line-wise, they're very injured. They're very young. I would say that the Seahawks are... See, because they have such great coaching, it's hard to put them in the worst. Like, they're not a worst. I think they're average. I think they can play good. Like, they're kind of like the Redskins to me. I think they're very comparable to the Redskins. They have some really good players, but they also have some holes. And I think they're very young in certain areas, which is going to hurt them. But Pete Carroll elevates them. Bobby Wagner elevates them. No Frank Clark is going to hurt. Lack of pass rush will hurt. So they're average. Denver Broncos, I think they have the ability to be elite, but I'm going to put them in the good category. They have an elite coordinator in Vic Fangio. They have Chris Harris, who's an elite corner. They have Von Miller, who's obviously one of the best defensive players in the league. Bradley Chubb is a beast. They have a number of other players. They added Kareem Jackson. I think they added Bryce Callahan as well to their secondary. So their secondary is very talented, especially the corner position. So Broncos, I would say they're not as good in terms of they're like the Texans to me. They have some elite players, but they're not all the way there in terms of depth. The Oakland Raiders defense, I would still put in the worst category. They do have some better players, don't get me wrong, but we don't know about their pass rush yet, whether Clelin Ferrell is going to be that guy, whether Arden Key is going to be that guy. We don't know about their secondary yet. I mean, Connolly's still very young. LaMarcus Joyner was a nice add for them, but I don't think they're in the opportunistic category. They could be, but they're not there yet. The LA Chargers, I think, are also, and some people would want them to be in the elite category. I would put them in the good category. I don't think there's that many elite defenses in the NFL. The Chargers are good. And the reason why they're good is, I'll put it simply, they are very talented, but their scheme is not ideal. I mean, they play the cover 3 scheme, and whenever they play a team like New England, they just get ripped up. So, you saw it in the playoffs. They have the capability, if you play the right offensive coordinator and the right coach combination, you can get torn up playing that style of defense. So they're in the good category. They're often very good, but sometimes they can be taken advantage of. So that's why they're in the good category. The Miami Dolphins, I think, are kind of interesting. I'm actually going to place the Dolphins in the opportunistic category because they don't have the greatest talent, but they have a very good coordinator. Brian Flores will help out with their defense, and they do have some playmakers on defense. So, like, whether that's Howard or Fitzpatrick, I think they have some players that can make plays, and that's why they're in the opportunistic category, probably in the bottom of that category, but they're not one of the worst defenses, but they'll probably give up a lot of points because their offense sucks and their team sucks in general, but they will make plays as well in certain games. The Green Bay Packers. Now, before I would probably put them somewhere in the opportunistic, worst, or even average category if I was being nice, but now I think they're in the good. I think they're possibly a top 10 defense this year with all that they added in the offseason, from the 2 Smith brothers to Adrian Amos. They have Alexander at corner. So they have some really talented players, and they have Kenny Clark, Mike Daniels. Both would be borderline. Kenny Clark's probably a top 100 player. Mike Daniels is probably borderline top 100. So Packers definitely have a lot of talent, especially up front. That's where they're really good. Just their secondary, they need to prove a little bit more. So that's why they're in the good. But they could be elite, honestly. San Francisco 49ers, I would say they're opportunistic. They could be potentially good if if they can really prove that their secondary is improved, but they didn't really add anybody to that secondary. So that's where I'm kind of a little bit concerned. But with DeForest Buckner on the D-line, Boza on the D-line, you have D Ford on the D-line. I think they'll be a lot like the Rams in that sense. They have a very good defensive line. They have Richard Sherman in the secondary. Quan Alexander was a nice added linebacker, but they just haven't really proven anything. But I do think they're a defense that will make a lot of plays, get a lot of sacks, be good on third down. So overall, opportunistic is where the 49ers fit. The Bucs are in the worst category. Now, I don't think they have terrible talent up front, but their secondary is really, really terrible. Like, I would consider the Bucs secondary is the only one that really compares to the Chiefs in terms of how bad they are. So they're in the worst category. Like, they have some good talent up front. Like, don't get me wrong. White's really good. Like, he's a rookie, but he's really good. And I think Jarrell McCoy is still there. I like some of the additions they had. They have Levante David, who's still really good. So they have front seven talent, but they don't have secondary talent, whether that's safety or corner. They just need to find that talent, and they haven't yet. So they're in the worst category. Minnesota Vikings. Now, they have the talent to be elite, and they have been elite in the past. So it's interesting. Harrison Smith at safety, Xavier Rhodes at corner. You have Anthony Barrs back, Kendricks at linebacker. You have Hunter and Griffin at DN, Linval Joseph. I would say they're borderline elite, but they're probably just good right now because they didn't really play elite last year. I need to see Zimmer fix this defense a little bit before I put them back in the elite category. They're good, possibly very good. They're probably like the Chargers. Let's compare them to them. The Baltimore Ravens, tough. Because they have really good coaching, but they did lose C.J. Mosley. They did lose Zadarius Smith. They added a couple players recently. They have a really good secondary. They have a really good run defense. But I don't know. That linebacker core is sort of scaring me a little bit. I think they're... Again, I should have made another category. I feel like there's another category in here somewhere for the very good teams. But I'll put them in the good. I don't think, like, I want to give them the respect they deserve for playing how well they played last year. But with the, like, losing CJ Mosley, that's a huge loss. Like, he's their leader, their defense. I know they added Earl Thomas, but yeah, they're very good. I don't know if they're elite next year, though. That's the thing. So I'm going to go good. I don't think they're quite as good as they were last year. I think they're just beneath that. The Atlanta Falcons, I think they're average because they're opportunistic. They're opportunistic. I said that wrong. Because they have Keanu Neal, who's like a turnover machine. They still have Desmond Trufant at corner, but they don't have much else besides that. They do have Deion Jones, who's very fast, plays great in coverage, very good linebacker. Their DN situation is a little iffy for me, even though they added Adrian Claiborne back. He's better in that scheme than he was in New England. And Grady Jarrett's elite. So they have some really good players. Like, they have an elite player to every position, like every level, whether it's Jarrett, Jones, or Neal, but they don't have like a lot of depth. So that's where they're at opportunistic. They can make plays. They can have some good moments with Dan Quinn, but they're not great. And I wouldn't say they're average either. Like, they're just opportunistic. The Carolina Panthers, they're very much like Atlanta. They have elite player. Like, they have Luke Kuechly, who doesn't get much better than that. They have Quan Short, who's very good. They have Addison, who's a good pass rusher. They added Burns, who I really like. I don't think they have the corners, though. So I'm going to say they're like the Seahawks. They're average. They have like Bobby Wagner, Luke Kuechly. They have some young players in the secondary who are promising, but not exactly there yet. They have promising pass rush. I would say they're probably a little bit better than the Seahawks. It's very close, but yeah, they're right there in the average category. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they get a bad rap. I think they are also opportunistic. I don't think they're great. I don't even think they're good, but they really know how to rush the passer. They know their blitzing schemes are excellent. TJ Watt is very good. They have a really good front seven from Tuitt to Hayward. They have decent secondary players in some spots, but they don't have anyone that's very good. So their secondary could be better, and that's why I probably don't have them in the good category, but they do make plays and they do have good games. So I'm going to put them in the opportunistic category. The Cleveland Browns, they have the talent to be good, but I don't know if they're good yet. It's because I haven't seen it. Like Denzel Ward, very talented. They have Myles Garrett. They have Olivier Vernon. They added Sheldon Richardson. They have Schobert and Kirksey. Safety plays, all right. Not great. I think, and I really like the ad of the corner in the draft. I think because I haven't seen it yet, I'm going to say average. I think that's sort of where they were last year. They'll probably be a little bit towards the good this year, but I'm not quite ready to put them there yet. And I don't quite trust them in terms of defensive scheme like some of these other teams. So I'm going to put them in the average. The New York Jets, they don't have any pass rushers. They have really elite safeties. Adams, I think, is the best safety in the league. Linebackers, in terms of inside linebackers, are very good. CJ Mosley will elevate everybody around him. They got the best defensive player, arguably the best player in the draft. They have Williams already, the other Williams. I'm going to say they're average because I don't think they have great corners and they don't have great pass rushers. And those are two things you need. But they do have CJ Mosley, and that interior linebacker core with him and Williamson will elevate everyone around them. They have a really good run defense and a interior defensive line that will be destructive and impactful, and they have really good safeties. So they're really good down the middle of their defense, but in terms of their edges and their corners, it's not very good. So I'm going to put them in the average category. So that's how I rank every defense in the NFL. Those are my thoughts on every defense, kind of like an overview of every defense, where I'm thinking they'll kind of be this year. If I had to split it up even more, I think the elite teams, like I had right off the jump, Jaguars, Bears, Dallas. The very good category, I would put the Eagles, the Patriots, the Bills, the Chargers, the Vikings, and the Ravens. The good category, I would have the Titans, Texans, Saints, Broncos, Packers. The average, Bengals, Lions, Cardinals, Redskins, Seahawks, Panthers, Browns, Jets. Opportunistic, the teams that create turnovers, very good situationally. Chiefs, Colts, Rams, Dolphins, 49ers, Pittsburgh, Atlanta. The worst defenses in the NFL, the Giants, Raiders, and the Bucs. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, Gronk spike the like button. Subscribe to The Bottom Line View if you haven't already. It's Mitch. Peace out.